Welcome to the Brave Feminine Leadership interview series, where I get to spend time with some of the world's best leaders, and together we get to soak up their wisdom and perspective on all things life and leadership. I always say that my greatest learnings came from being invited into the room to observe other leaders. And so I want to welcome you into the room with me today as I welcome Leanne Caret into the room. Leanne, so good to have you here with me.
It is lovely to see you, Melissa. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, let me touch on your bio for people in our audience who haven't had the pleasure of working with you before or meeting you before. So, Leanne is a veteran CEO, a Fortune 100 director, and an expert on building high performing organizations and transforming industries via technology. Leanne's driven by grit and gumption, and her lifelong motto to leave things better than you find them. Leanne is a true aerospace pioneer as the first woman to serve as president and CEO of Boeing Defense, Space and Security, overseeing 30,000 employees across 4 continents and driving growth in annual 30 billion revenue. Today, Leanne serves as a board director, chair of audit committees for both Deere Company and RTX. She also serves as a senior advisor to Blackstone and My Next Season and has several non-profit boards. Leanne has been on Fortune Most Powerful Women lists for 5 consecutive years. And I happen to know, Leanne, that you've got zero patience for corporate speak. So I promise today that we are not going to circle back, leverage synergies. We're not
Oh,
going to move the needle or look for any low-hanging fruit. Welcome to the podcast. Who are you as a human being, Leanne?
I'm Leanne. And actually, I have to share with you, Melissa, that has taken me a little bit of time to get comfortable with that. As you shared, I spent 35 years with the Boeing Company. I am second generation Boeing. My mom and dad actually met there. I grew up within the company and then I started my career. And so when I retired, and I hate the word retired because I don't think I'm retired, but when I retired for my formal corporate role, it was like, who am I now? And I had to get really comfortable to realize that I'm not my job and I'm Leanne. And so, I love the fact that that's how I introduce myself now. And you said something in the intro, which is super important, which is I like to leave things better than I found it. And that actually came about 30 years ago when I was early in my career and I was asked what my epitaph was. Now, this is pre Google, pre phones. I didn't know what an epitaph was. I had to ask around the room. There was about 30 of us in this forum, and somebody said, "Is what's going to be on your headstone?" And I was, "Oh my gosh, that is like so morbid. Like, who thinks about that?" And I see all these people scribbling notes about this stuff, and I realize, why am I here? I have zero purpose. I mean, like zero purpose. And it is probably one of the few real soul searching moments I had. And I determined then and there that if I can make things better than I found them and leave it better and know that the person coming behind me would be able to leave it better, then that is what really it's that will be my gift. And so I have really focused on that throughout my entire career. So that's who I am. And I like to do it with a smile.
I love that, Leanne. So tell us your story. I mean, this fascinating story through your career of leading Boeing, second generation Boeing, as you said, your parents worked there as well. How did your career unfold? And I've got all sorts of questions about, did you, you told me you never dreamed of becoming a CEO. I want to know along the way when that started to become real as well. So let's focus on that story first.
Well, I let me again. My mom and dad met. Well, my dad, they were both working at the company in New Orleans, Louisiana, and so I have a lot of Southern in my family. And I happened to be. They happened to move just prior to me being delivered, and I was born at Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, to many folks, where all the Apollo missions have occurred, different, just great space history. So I always consider myself a space baby.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, Melissa, never had any aspirations of spacecraft flying or airplanes flying. I needed a job when I graduated from university. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I literally, through grace and luck, found an opportunity to work inside the company. And back in 1988, I mean, that's like 100 years ago. And that's like 100 years ago. And I just had a great time. I fell in love not just with the company, but with the customer. I spent my entire career on the defense side of the business, both with the US and the allied nations. And in my career, I actually had someone share with me once that your contribution to the fight is not defined by your proximity to the fight. And what that means is servicemen and women who put their lives on the line to make sure all of us have the freedoms that we do around the world. They have to trust that the products and services that industry provides will work.
Yes.
And so while we may not be on the front line with them for those 24/7, 365 days a year, the reality is we are. And so that became my true calling, and making certain that we were able to help the customer achieve their mission became our mission as well. So it's just such a blessing. I took on lots of different jobs throughout my career, did a stint as a CFO, had a lot of operating roles, lots of P&L roles. And as we talk about, as folks are coming up through the pipeline, what helps make them ready for a C-suite spot, it's being able to be held accountable for results. And there's nothing better than taking on those P&L roles, especially the ones that probably make you give you a couple of headaches and maybe make you want to throw up a couple of
Yeah.
times. Those are the best jobs in the world. And then in 2016, I was asked to lead the defense and space security business of the Boeing Company. And it was just such a great honor and a privilege. And I will tell you, the day they asked me, I honestly had no idea what they were asking me. It never occurred to me. And I am a big believer that there are folks who spend their entire life trying to achieve a certain position, and and a lot of times those folks aren't happy. There is something about loving the journey as much as the jobs and the end result. And so for me, I just have had a glorious journey, and I feel so very blessed. So it's been fantastic.
Let's go to that conversation. You made me smile because you made me remember when I was also asked to step into the CEO role. And I swore. I swore because the timing wasn't right. It wasn't on my radar. It was, all of those things. There's never a perfect time, right, to do those things. But what gave you the confidence you could do it?
Well, first off, I thought they were firing me at that exact moment. So that was actually the first thing I said when they closed the door to talk to me. They said, "We need to talk to you." And I said, "Oh my God, you're firing me." I was like, "What are you firing me for?" And they're like, "What are you talking about?" So I didn't even have the concept in my head. And I will tell you, and as you know, with any new opportunity, none of us are ever ready, which is why I've always said, don't use the words, "I'm going to take a chance on you." You've heard that speak in a lot of different interviews or in discussions about selecting different leaders. We take a chance on everybody every day. And so I had the blessing of having had a lot of diverse roles. I had been at a lot of different sites, so I had moved around a lot. I knew flight lines, I knew factory floors, I knew the sustainment system. I'd had a stint as a CFO. And so really through almost a lucky fortune of events, I had had a number of key roles that prepared me. And in the beginning, Melissa, of course, I didn't think I had a clue what I was doing. And honestly, probably those around me didn't either.
Yeah.
But I grew into the job and I had a fantastic team. And that is, I always think the secret sauce is the team. And if you can bring folks together, especially folks who probably aren't always the superstars,
Yeah.
it is amazing the magic that can happen.
Absolutely. You told me when we first spent some time together that early in your career you were told that you laughed and smiled too much to be management material. I can see that hasn't changed, right? There's a lot of laughter and smile. Tell us about that.
Oh my gosh. So this just shows how time has evolved, or let's say how we hope time has evolved. This was in the 90s, mid 90s. And my boss actually came to me and said, you're not going to make management. There is a view that you laugh too much, you smile too much, you have too much fun. Leanne, you don't fit the mold. And I'm so thankful to him. And actually, he and I stayed in contact throughout my entire career until he just passed not too long ago. And he's just was a fabulous human being and a fabulous friend. He said, I need to help you get to somewhere where you can be successful. And what was very interesting is that Melissa, I wasn't even offended at the time. And you may too have experienced these moments where some of these comments that are made, that because we were the only and because we didn't look like everybody else, that we just expected that the rules were a little different when it came to
Yes.
us. And so I never stewed about it. But what I did learn as time went on is I wanted to be a leader who folks liked talking to, who, when they left the room with me, even if we had a bad, hard conversation, they knew I cared. And I wanted to be fair most of all. And what I found is humor is it is an incredible asset to have to change the mood, to make difficult news better, and to help folks come together. And so when you can smile, when you say hello to folks, you can develop relationships that enable you to do so much more when times are really tough. Because I bet you, as you were CEO, you saw hundreds of opportunities where if you hadn't had that relationship, those conversations would have been all but impossible.
Absolutely. With all levels, with the board, with your
Oh,
team, with everyone.
yes. And in all transparency, I was the president and CEO of a very large division. I did not have a separate board from the Boeing company.
Yeah.
But I was in front of the board at every board meeting and all the different committees and different things like that. And to your point, having those relationships up and down are important, but I will tell you, the most important relationships are horizontal,
Is.
because they're the folks who are going to be with you through thick and thin, because you can only do so much up. And honestly, not everybody has time. And frankly, that level changes, and your team, they need you. And that's assumed that you're going to be able to do that. But having those horizontal relationships, that was a key learning for me in my career, that I really focused on making that group of folks part of my network and part of my life.
Mm. You also said to me, you talked about being a machine and a detail freak. Tell
Okay,
me
so you
about
are
the kind
too.
of,
Okay, you can't, like, you are too. Like, it's all of our secret. Like, we don't want anybody to know because everybody has such a bad, but like, totally ability to consume information and separate it into what's important and what's not is so important.
mm. Did it ever get in your way as you were, moving out through your career at all?
Oh, of course, because you start to know a little too much and you start to think you know more than everybody else. And one of the greatest sins and the greatest risks, I think, for all leaders, especially as they move up in organizations, is your ability to let others do their jobs. There's a big difference between management and leadership. As leaders, we need to enable people. We need to trust them to do their jobs. I actually think it's one of the reasons why I had some success is because I wasn't a degreed engineer. I didn't grow up in the engineering field. So my engineers were super important and I trusted them.
Mm.
I wasn't a true CFO. I held a CFO. People will say I was a CFO, but I wasn't an accountant. I wasn't a controller. So my accountants and my controllers, I really was dependent on them. I tried to be the icing on the cake that brought everybody together.
Yeah.
That was important.
What a
Yeah.
lovely analogy. I know that you now write a lot of articles and you share them through LinkedIn, so all sorts of different things and newsletters. And you shared an article recently about butterflies and about growing in confidence in your career. It was a beautiful article, and part of it talked about, places where well, moments maybe in your career where you feel out of place and you don't feel like you belong. Did you have any moments like that along the way in your career?
I'm having one right now. I mean, no, seriously. I mean, let's be honest. Have you?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, of course, right?
So many.
We always think. I don't know why it is. We think that by the time people get to some of these positions, that they've been anointed and they just like fell out of the heavens or something, and they have this angel effect. I mean, honest to goodness, if you haven't had trying times, if you haven't perhaps been fired from jobs, or you haven't had work scope reduced, or you haven't had bad performance reviews. I mean, if you don't have those scars, you're not going to, get to some of those other roles. And one of my biggest challenges is always been social settings, receptions, cocktail hours. I mean, I have I just dread them because it's like making idle talk so you can come across that you actually know more than just what's happening in your business.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh. So I was one of those folks that like timed it so I only had to be at a social event for about 20 minutes. I'd come in just late enough before the main event. I'd circulate, talk to a few folks, because I just was so uncomfortable. And even today, I come across as an extrovert, but I keep telling people I'm really not. I'm not sure they believes me, but I'm just telling you.
I would love a moment's advice on that because, I get asked that question so much by so many people. And recently, an executive who is younger than all of her peers. And so when they get together, they're at the stage in life of talking about kids and college and, all sorts of things. She's a lot younger and so comes to the table and feels like she doesn't have anything to contribute. I'd love to hear what you would say to someone in that position.
I got the bet. Well, first off, I totally can understand where she's coming from because my husband and I were never blessed with kids. And so it was kind of like that epitaph moment when everybody's writing, I'm going to be a great mother. And, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't get to write that down. Here's the tip I learned from a really close friend of mine. I actually went and I asked for advice because they were just brilliant at working a room. Like some people are brilliant at working a room. He said, whatever question is asked of you, you ask it back. Most people love to talk about themselves. He said, you can actually get through an entire conversation and say hardly anything once you open. So that's actually my tip.
Yeah.
I go to receptions, somebody will say something, I will ask one or two questions, direct them, and they're off to the races, and I can smile and be participative, but not have to come think of global theories on economics
Yes.
or that we need to talk about. So my
Yeah.
advice to her would be whatever question they asked of you, it's because that's what they're thinking about in their mind. Ask it back and let them go.
Let them go. I love that. It reminds me also of a CFO who didn't want to go to networking events because she felt she was going to have to offer opinions on all of those world events and things you're talking about.
The other thing you can't talk about is like what's going on. Well, as a CFO, you know where like all the bad stuff is, and you're trying to make sure you can manage that properly with the right lexicon. Totally.
You also talk about something incredibly dear to my heart. And before we move into the sort of board space more fully, you talk about showing up.
That's important.
What do you mean? Like, just expand on that for people. What do you mean?
Well, a couple of things, and I'll start with there's four characteristics or attributes that I think have been fundamentally important in my journey. Grit, gumption, grace, and gratitude. So I'll explain them to you, and it really kind of shows how I expect people to show up, right? So grit is, take the hard jobs, roll up your sleeves, be engaged, be involved. Don't ask people to do something that you have never done or you wouldn't be willing to do. One of my best memories, and something I try to emulate throughout my career, is early on, we were working around the clock. It was those late hours where, you're in the office at 2 in the morning or something. We were doing some proposals. And the gentleman who was the senior leader for the site literally came back to work just to say hi. And he didn't have to do it. He brought some donuts or something. It was like not a big deal to him. He probably wouldn't even remember that moment because that's who he was.
Yeah.
But for me, it stuck with me that he cared enough to show up. And so in the world that I lived in, we worked incredible amounts of hours, holidays, weekends, lots of overtime. And so showing up when people least expected it to show them that they mattered was very important.
Mm.
Gumption is about believing in yourself. One of the things I have found over my career, especially when I speak with mentor women, is that we tend to discount our abilities. our experiences. We aren't as willing to take a chance on ourselves as we are willing to tell people to take a chance on themselves.
Mm.
And so gumption is about, reaching inside you and believing in yourself. And I have a little green Martian. His name's Gazoo. He was from this comic strip, The Flintstones, a little TV cartoon show. And he's that little voice in my head that tells me how bad I am, like, what are you doing? Like, that's wrong, whatever the words are. And I have had to learn on how to just kind of like brush him off, compartmentalize, and realize that those internal thoughts don't need to become my external face.
Mm-mm.
Because we don't want to propagate a narrative that only exists in our head to begin with and give people something to think about that they weren't even thinking about. And so gumption is super important. And it culminates for me, and it's something that we see as we think about people moving up in their careers, is don't opt out.
Yeah.
I had a young woman, Melissa, one day come to my office, and she wanted some career advice, and she was being offered a promotion. She was an engineer. She was being offered a promotion to the next level. She wasn't sure she wanted to take it. And I said, why? And she goes, well, I'm going to have children. And I said, well, first off, I was like, oh, congratulations. And she's like, oh, no, I'm not pregnant. And then the whole conversation got kind of sideways because at that point I was a little confused. And she said, but one day I will.
Yeah.
And do I really want to take this opportunity knowing that one day I may have to take a pause or I may have to step back? And I said, none of our lives are planned out well enough to know what may or may not happen. Take the moment, enjoy it, embrace it, and be all in. And that to me is super important.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is grace. And my mom taught me this, and I owe so much to her, but how you win is as important as how you lose. And I think it sets the tone for how you behave with others. It's not just how you treat people that you think you need to be nice to, or when people are watching. It is about how you are and how you own your mistakes. And one of the greatest, in my mind, one of the greatest attributes of a leader is their ability to stand up and say, I was wrong. Because I mean, you and I both know you don't have 100% of the data. So you've got to be able to make decisions on 80%. And that means sometimes you're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And so I figure if you give grace, you get grace. And then finally, it's gratitude, and it's about saying thank you. And it seems that gets harder as we get older. I don't know why that is, but thank you is the most powerful word. And I have a box here in my office of every thank you note I've ever received,
Oh, lovely.
even sticky notes. And of all the things I've gotten in my career, I've got wonderful awards, great plaques, all this stuff. That box is my most treasured possession. Because if somebody takes the time to send you a note or to write something out, it means a lot. And so that became part of who I was, where I routinely handwrite notes, and I still do this day, send out things to thank people and let them know they matter and they've done a great job, even when it's really hard. So that to me are the attributes that are super important as a leader.
Thank you for expanding on showing up. You made a decision at a point in your career, and tell us about how that came about, but to transition away from executive roles into company director roles.
Oh, yeah. At some point, all of us need to recognize that we may not be the right leader for the time going forward. That at some point you might be making the same decisions that you made 3 years or 5 years before, and you're having a hard time accepting doing it a different way. I was actually sitting with an individual today that was a founder who had started their own company, and it was very interesting listening to him because he was really echoing some of those same thoughts. He's like, I realized the decisions I'm making actually aren't the right ones for the way the world operates today. Just think of how social media is used versus when we started our career. And so, but with that being said, that doesn't mean that the experiences we've been through aren't helpful to others. And so that is really where, in many ways, advising and board directorships are a great way to take the learnings and to take the experience set and apply it to help, to be of help to others. Not to try to come in and run their companies, but to help from let's say, governance and risk perspectives, from succession planning to be a sounding board, to give the CEO or the C-suite confidence that, the decisions they're making are tough, but we've got your back. There's three types of board members in my mind. There's those who just want to be on a board because it looks great on their CV or resume. And there are people that want that. There are board members who want to be there because they really want to run the company, and they actually want to be part of the management team, but they're not. And that creates really some hard conversations. And then there's board members who really are focused on that governance, that risk angle, succession planning, and hoping the company achieve the dreams that the CEO and his and her team want to achieve. And so I've always been very purposeful. And when I interviewed for the Deere board, I actually said that to John May. I said, here's the three, and I want to be group three. I want to be helpful. I don't want to be a hindrance. That doesn't mean you're a pushover, but I also don't have aspirations to take your job. And having that for me is a really great way to use some wonderful talent that's out there and help people achieve their growth plans and their operational objectives. But at the same time, have some folks that maybe have been there and seen it and can at least offer some perspectives.
Did you find any of it hard? I mean, was there a gap between the exec role and the board role?
I didn't have a time gap, but in terms of was it hard? Absolutely, because I found myself wanting to be in category 2.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm sitting in there going, I forgot how much I like this. I really love being here. I have ideas. I have thoughts. Have you all? And I had to remember what my place was. And I actually had to change my lexicon from being directive to have you considered?
Yeah.
I would offer this as a suggestion or an idea for you to consider. The word consider became such an important word for me to adopt as a board director, more so than I ever used in, as an operator. And it was because that it makes certain that you understand your role, but it also makes you valuable, because you don't want a management team that doesn't want to talk to the board. It doesn't matter what company it is. You want to have that cohesive relationship where we each have rules to live by and work to, but you don't want to move into the wrong lane. You've got to understand the rules of the road. I don't know if that made sense or not.
Yeah, it does make sense. How do you make an assessment sitting on a board? How do you make an assessment that the board and the management team are working together effectively?
Transparency. When you can have tough conversations about sensitive topics, and it's done and you can tell it's not being cloaked in a whole bunch of bizarre ways, corporate speak, or you have to find it buried in the material, or it's casually mentioned in one of the committees but not the full board. The reality is transparency is the key to success. And it was very interesting. And I don't know, Melissa, if you've seen the study. Spencer Stewart did a study here not too long ago. They just published it, where they said CEOs want more from their board members, not just noses in, fingers out. They actually want board members that can provide advice and counsel. They want board members that they know have their back during difficult times and when difficult decisions are being made. And that's that's an evolved position. And as the CEOs continue to turn over, and we see CEOs turning over pretty fast globally, you can see why they want that, because they want that wisdom and advice. They need you to let them go run the business, but they want to have you be a valued partner still within, the governance rules and your oversight rules, because oversight doesn't go away. But I think transparency is the key.
And it might just be the inverse of it, but what would give you cause to maybe lose confidence in a CEO?
If I read about it in the newspaper and I don't hear about it from them first,
Yeah.
I think we get some, it's kind of like when we were in the management team, right? If I'm hearing something through the rumor mill or from a customer or my gosh, through the media, which, as you know, the media, they have tentacles everywhere. If you hear something that way and you aren't aware of it, that's a foul.
Yeah.
It's really the same way. Now, there's also degrees of, reason. How much does a board need to know about which topics? There's thresholds and all that. So, there's common sense with that. But I think a good sign would be if you're learning about some significant event through the media, that to me would be, say it's problematic.
Yeah. I want to swing back to when you were CEO. And I know as a CEO, there's so many different things to focus on. How did you work out? How did you get clear on what you needed to focus on for your organization?
Well, I don't know that I ever did. So first off, I am certain there are people who work for me who love me. There are people who work for me who didn't love me. You have the whole spectrum. But what I did try to do is learn from those who I had seen be successful. And you learn both from those, you learn what to do and what not to do. And one of the things for me was I made a decision to spend a third of my time on strategy and the customers, a third of my time on operations, operational, everyday operational reviews, because as a data freak, I could spend every day in a factory. I mean, so like I had to put some boundaries in place. And then a third of my time with the team. And then we actually measured how I spent my time. And you could tell where my comfort zone was because I could easily, that operational element, I could spend half to 75% of my time. Well, that means something else was suffering. And so it was a good way for me to stay in check. And I look at it about a quarter at a time because, you have ups and downs, kind of a little bit chunky. But that way, those were my guiding principles to try to stay in balance and also to recognize that my strength of being a detail freak and loving the factory and being out there, well, it could also be my greatest weakness because I could like not do those other things.
Mm.
So that's how I did it.
It's fascinating because I mean, I share the story of I came up through the operating stream as well. So I know that comfort zone, and so many people know that comfort zone, right? Like it's our old job, it's what we've been rewarded for and good at. And for me, strategy was what I had to learn. And
Oh,
so,
oh my gosh. And it's like I would like go hide under my desk because it's like if I had to see another PowerPoint, I wanted to throw up. Were you the same way?
yes, I didn't know. I mean, I really had to learn that, and got help to do it.
Did you ever end up really loving it?
Yes. So, yes, but it was a real discipline to pull myself out of the detail
Yes.
and I think it was purely that it was a comfort zone issue because I didn't know what to spend my time on. I found that when I focused on strategy, I wasn't productive, like
Yes.
I didn't feel like I was doing anything. So it was a big shift.
Well, and especially once you get the numbers and you have the plan, and then it's funny that I'm so glad you said that because I had a great strategy team when I took on the role, and I was really clear with them that that was not my sweet spot, and they had to like lock me in a room. I mean, like it was like this is like forced feeding.
Yes.
We're not leaving it, Leanne, until we can get. And I found that I started to enjoy the what if and the possibilities. And for me, it was always about the power of and. I didn't like putting things in the context of either or. It was like, how can we do a lot of things and build upon them? But I will still say, Melissa, it was never my first, it still is it's not my first love. I love, the operational aspect.
Getting it to work, getting the people to, yeah.
Yeah.
Leanne, I'm always fascinated when I interview incredible female leaders that honestly, 9 times out of 10, I hear them describe their career as luck or lucky.
Oh, I did that too.
And you did it too. So
Congratulations. I check.
tick, tick, you're in part of the 9 or 10 who did that. But of course, there is some luck associated, of course, there is some luck for any leader who navigates their way through, complex careers and organizations. If we were to say, well, it's not all luck, what do you think are some of the intentional things that you've done along the way that have served you well?
It is such a great question, and I think it's very relevant. Uh, and I actually think it's relevant for men and women. I think it's a little, I tend to see with the women I speak to, this is more of a mental shift for them than for some of the gentlemen. First off, it goes back to that gumption. It goes back to not opting out. We spend so much time with lists. I mean, I don't know about you. I love lists. Have you ever like written something down, Melissa, just to cross it off to feel like you
Totally.
achieved?
Yeah, every day.
Oh, and so we have these career plans, right? We have these timelines, and we have to feel that we're perfectly prepared for each step, and we don't give ourselves credit that nobody's perfectly prepared. Nobody at any level, whether it's at the board, the C-suite, anywhere. I think that is an area where all of us can benefit from. I know I could have, which is to take a chance and bet on myself. And what I would follow that with is to take the hard jobs. And I will say something, it's not very eloquent. You will can reframe it into something that's more polished. But I always share with folks, take the job that's going to make you lay awake at night and want to go throw up. And I mean that when I say that, because I do that with distinction, because it's not just a headache. It's not just a worry. It is like you have a compulsive fear of what is happening that you have to go dig in and learn. And those are your best moments. If you only take jobs that you're ready for,
Yeah.
well, you're not learning along the way. So, and in the business world, and I bet you'll agree with me on this, that means you cannot spend your life in functions.
Yeah.
You have to go run a P&L. I don't care how small, I don't care how large. I prefer if you do both a functional role at some point and an operating role, but 9 times out of 10, I'll be so bold to say 10 times out of 10, the CEOs who are going to be selected have done operational roles and not just one,
Yes.
which also means you may have to relocate. You can't, it's kind of like you have to pay to play. If you want to do this and you think you're going to stay in a small town at a place that has 1,000 employees and you're going to end up being the CEO or a C-suite, it's probably for a large corporation, probably not going to happen. You have to be willing to get experiences across the organization. And so being willing to be uncomfortable, being willing to disrupt your life, that's part of it. And there are those of us who enjoy and thrive doing it. There are others who they don't want any part of that, but don't lament that you didn't get the opportunity if you're not willing to play the game, because you have to pay to play to just get the experiences. And then finally, I think another really important part is your network. You need to network up, you need to network across, you need to network externally to your company and in your industry. People need to know your name. They need to know what you stand for. And I don't mean being out there on social media. That's not what I mean. This is about being at industry events, being at forums, reading The Economist, reading the Financial Times, being able to have conversations. This goes back to showing up, understanding what's happening in the world around you beyond your little world. That comes a little bit with maturity and experience, but it is so critical for folks to see that you have the potential to lead at scale. And I bet you have 100 million others that you would add to this list, but off the top of my head, those are a few.
Fantastic. What are you curious about? This next chapter of your life, as we said, and you're definitely not retired. You've got a lot going on your plate, but what are you deeply curious about at this stage?
I haven't given up on the notion to get back in the game again in a full-time corporate role.
Mm.
Um, I love working. So I'm also trying to make certain that all these other ideas I've had, I'm trying to explore them to understand if there's a pony in that pile that I might like. So for instance, I like to cook. So I've taken a couple of cooking classes. I decided I wanted to, like, I bake a cake, and I went and took an icing class, and I came out of that. I'm like, okay, there's no way I could do that full time. I mean, it's one thing to enter a cake in a competition, and I'll do that every year because I really enjoy it. But I'm not destined to be a baker. Understanding my risk profile. I'm investing, I'm being different. My husband, he has a business. We're investing in some companies. We're thinking through a different lens. So I am learning an incredible amount there. But something that's really struck at me and is, we are only given one life to live. Choose to be happy. And everybody's definition of happy is theirs. And so much of our career, we are comparing ourselves to others, or we're compared to others, whether it be in the C-suite or in the boardroom or whatever it is. And a gift that I want to give myself is to love who I am and to be happy and thriving, doing what I love to do. And, so that's super exciting for me. And so I'm still learning, I'm still learning.
Well, I would encourage anyone out there to find you on LinkedIn and start following and diving into some of the incredible articles that, are good to just see you sharing so much of your experience and thoughts and perspective. Because I know it's going to be a fascinating journey to keep watching what unfolds as you shift through this next phase, Leanne. Leanne, the final question I ask everybody, and I don't want our interview to end, but people have got limited time spans to be
People
able
have
to
like
watch.
lives. Yeah,
People
totally.
have lives outside of this.
They don't just want to sit and listen to you and I all day. I can,
Unbelievable, right? But
unbelievable.
what does brave feminine leadership mean to you, and do you think it needs to change?
I believe, well, so when you hear the word pro-feminine leadership, what it doesn't mean to me, and I'm going to do it through what it isn't about quotas. To me, it is about making, there's 100, if you think of the total world population, women have more college degrees than men do. There are more women in STEM than men are now. There's more women graduating from high school than men are at this stage. And yet, when you look at our companies globally, when you look at C-suites globally, when you look at boards globally, you aren't seeing a proportionate amount of female leadership to male leadership. Now, is some of that because some folks don't want to do it? Of course. Is some of it an unconscious bias? Of course. We tend to hire people that look and think like we do. It's just human nature. We have to be overt in doing something different. And so for me, what pro-feminine leadership means is I want the world's best companies. I want, nations to be successful and to be their very best. And to do that, you need the best talent. And so why would you ever limit yourself to half or a portion of the population? Take advantage of all of these great talents out there, regardless of what gender they are, and make certain we are really pulling the best talent. This isn't about quotas. The worst thing somebody could have said to me is, I got the jobs I got because it was a quota or because I was a token. Those are like the worst words in the whole world. This is about taking a chance on everybody, not just a portion of the population. So that's what it means to me.
And can I check, because I think this was my accent, the first word I said was brave. So brave feminine
Oh,
leadership.
I thought you said pro.
I
Brave.
know. Brave feminine
Well,
leadership.
brave. Okay, well, so I'm not sure I would actually change a lot of that other than to say, don't opt out.
Mm.
So many people make decisions based on what may happen. Don't opt out. Give yourself a chance to be the person you want to be.
Leanne, incredible to have you join the conversation. I'm so
Yeah,
grateful to have had you join me today.
so lovely. Oh my gosh, like I should be interviewing you. You're like the superstar. That is, we should have the audience.